thanks to Wondershare's demo creator for sponsoring this review. James and the Giant Peach. Yes, it is time to take a look at another cinematic piece based on the timeless works of Roald Dahl. After the surprisingly major success of The Nightmare Before Christmas, Disney immediately took the opportunity to work with Tim Burton and Henry Selick once again on another stop-motion musical. Only this time, instead of working on one of their personal passion projects, they were tasked with creating Disney's first Roald Dahl movie. On its initial release, it certainly was no hit like Nightmare. Sure, critics liked it, and Dahl's widow loved it and thought Roald would have too, but none of that helped its box office performance and ended up as a forgotten bomb. However, over time, that title became temporary and has since been more recognized as a piece of 1990s nostalgia, where many millennials have that distinctive memory from back in their youth about those singing bugs living in that massive fruit. So now that we'll be turning into puppets and getting in that peach, will this movie be as glamorous as New York City? Or will watching this feel like revisiting those disturbing aunts that you've tried to avoid? Let's find out.
You know, as much as I do have a lot to say about this movie, there might be a little bit of a chance that you might not necessarily agree with everything that I would say. And maybe by that point, you would want to actually go and try to make your own review so that your opinion on this movie will actually be spoken out for everyone to hear. Well, believe it or not, let me actually go and help you out with that by suggesting to you an editing software.
Demo Creator is one of the latest softwares developed by Wondershare, which I'm personally a fan of their Uniconverter, that is simultaneously a screen recorder and an editing software. But not just any kind. This is a real easy-to-use software that allows you to make videos quick and easy, along with adding additional effects on the spot to spice up your work, like camera recordings, audio fades, green screens, fancy cursors, zooms, spotlights, make drawings on the screen, cool transitions, and many more. It's actually perfect for when you want to make stuff like tutorials, gameplay footages, or even show yourself making your own digital art. In fact, I'm trying it right now with this plug, and even I'm getting the hang of it. If you want to try out Demo Creator for yourself, then go to the link in the description to download it now for free. But if you want to fully buy it to try out its true power, then I got you covered there too. Just use this promo code, and you'll receive up to 30% off to save you money on something that could save you time on making your next big hit. And if you got a crazy idea on what you want to make with Demo Creator, then share your plans in the comments and maybe others will find that you might be onto something.
Or if you want to make your own James and the Giant Peach review, then watch how I do it and maybe you'll find some inspiration in order to build your craft. Oh, which reminds me, by the way, you should actually get back to the review and actually watch it for yourself. I'll join you all later in the end.
The story. As it is based on a classic Roald Dahl novel, the movie does its best to emulate the tone of a children's book, telling the story through the lens of childlike wonder and exaggerate the mood of the moment to sell the situation. It can certainly have its own charm that can make audiences feel like a kid again by bringing the pages of Dahl's book to life. However, while its highest priority is to treat the storytelling like a living children's book, there is a significant part of it where it does so to a fault. The biggest issue with the feature is that it stays so true to the children's book tone that it ends up having the same amount of substance as one. Sure, it's a little shorter than the typical family film, but it doesn't change how the story is simple to the point of being basic, where it's just to get James from point A to point B, and most of the characters are one-dimensional, which I'll go more into detail a little later. Not to mention how it can feel like the picture talks down to its viewers as if they're as clueless as James, just so it sells its message of following your dreams and looking at things in a different way. It doesn't help either that the movie starts on a dreary note, not because of how James's life is miserable with his evil aunts, but because it gives little reason for its viewers to care for the kid as a character. and most of the fantastical elements then are only spoken about instead of showing it, resulting in the movie trying to sound whimsical instead of actually being it.
Then, one day, a terrible thing happened. An angry rhinoceros appeared out of nowhere and gobbled up his poor mother and father.
You know, I'd probably believe you if you actually show us a rhino gobbling up his parents, but the whole rhino thing feels like an allegory that forgot its own meaning. But despite the little amount of writing material it had to work with to tell a feature-length story, it's not until when the stop motion enters the scene at the 20-minute mark where the movie begins to be enjoyable. That's when the execution helps a lot to capture that spirit of a children's novel that was missing at the start and becomes so much more engaging. Everything becomes a lot livelier and more energetic, the extraordinary elements are actually shown to make the world more immersive, and the characters are more amusing to help the viewers find that motivation to see them make it to New York. Like many features based on a children's novel, the story does have its share of problems while having little to deliver and can treat its audience like they're too young to understand anything, but at the same time, it can capture the fun-loving tone of one to give its audience somewhat of a good time. The animation. Not only is the movie committed to have its tone feel similar to the style of a children's book, but it also wants to look like a children's book too. In fact, Disney hired famed illustrator Lane Smith to work on concept art and create designs for the animated characters. The result apparently turned out to be so good that the Doll family later hired him to create new illustrations for the James and the Giant Peach book. And honestly, I can see why they did so, because the animation is easily the best part of the movie. Sure, it had to wait about 20 minutes to get there while the actors had to work around these sets that had a bit of trouble getting his forced perspective to work, but once James gets inside that peach, that's when the animation takes over to supply the magic that the movie promised that it would deliver. One thing's for sure is that the designs succeed in looking like living book illustrations, having the characters look simple and emphasize the use of shapes for their silhouettes, but also highlight the bug parts of them so that they each have unique features to help them move around, express themselves, and especially to have their personalities stand out from one another. And add in the factor that this is all for stop motion, the style works very well to bring these designs to a 3D environment, along with being handled by great animators at the time to deliver smooth and expressive animation that takes advantage of the designs by playing a lot with the characters' extra limbs, or lack of in the Earthworm's case.
That's the life, that's the life, that's the life, that's the life.
But what makes the animation so great and make the feature enjoyable to watch is how it executes the journey to New York by fully taking advantage of the movie's creativity. Of course, as a musical, the moments where they sing is filled with choreographed dances and strong use of lighting, on top of having some hand-drawn animation to supply some of the effects. But there are also some action-packed moments where the gang had to face some threatening enemies like a giant mechanical shark and an undead pirate crew, where we learned that Jack Skellington was actually a pirate captain before he became the Pumpkin King of Halloween Town.
A skeleton?
Okay, by that point, they knew exactly what they were doing. They were just begging for fan theories to happen. If there is one thing to criticize with the animation, it's that it's quite lacking with the backgrounds. Sure, there are a few notable environments like turning the inside of the peach into a home for the bugs, the pirate ship, and the time when they sing family, but even those lean more on the generic side, and for the most part, it really is just blue skies and open seas. Not saying that they look bad, it's just that there's not much to look at to begin with. Then again, that could just be considered nitpicking because there is still a whole lot of stop-motion animation to check out and to admire in the way that it brings the pages of Roald Dahl to life. The characters. If you're going to travel to New York City on a giant peach, then the company that you're hanging out with better be good to make the adventure worth it. In the case of the movie, though, you shouldn't expect too much out of these characters. Since it doesn't include a good amount of substance to carry an entire feature film, the cast is generally one-dimensional with only their singular trait to define entirely who they are. There are maybe a couple of them that do have an arc to show how they've learned and grown throughout, but even that effort presented is minimal at best. Sure, there are ways that they can get around this and still come out as likable, but that certainly is not the case with the humans. When looking at the title character James, the movie gives very little to explain why the audience should actually care about him. Even if he was given some Cinderella-type origin story to make him more sympathetic, there was never a moment that presents why James is worth rooting for or explain why he deserves a better life. Yes, he's in a cruel environment with his heartless aunts, but that only explains what's around him instead of actually him. What reason does it have to not include such an integral component?
Sometimes I forget.
Well, fair enough. But for the most part, the biggest problem with James is that he's just a bland kid. Maybe some could argue that he's meant to be an avatar for the younger viewers to see themselves in James' shoes on his adventures, but when his name shares the title with the giant peach, it would be expected that he'd be as interesting to watch as the fruit. Not to mention that his acting is on the level of what would be expected from a school play. Yes, I know, he's just a kid, but that doesn't change how his performance has less credibility than a man-eating rhino.
Those buildings, these lights, this whole city. Somebody had to dream about it first, and maybe that's what I did.
Then there are his aunts Spiker and Sponge.
Work, 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 work!
Which I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that they're the rhino because they seem more likely to have eaten his parents. Anyways, they are the typical evil relatives whose purpose is to make the main character's life completely miserable. While I don't blame the acting to go as over the top as possible, I can see it work well in this case, but I think the problem is that they're not in the movie enough to really make the most out of them, only showing up at the start and in the end of the film. They have the potential to be enjoyable villains, but the movie spends more time talking about how evil they are than actually showing that. But then there are the bugs in the peach. On one hand, they only have their one personality trait to go with throughout the film. But, unlike the people, they actually make the most out of them with their respective actors delivering a witty performance, and like the animation, they each bring out their own style to make the movie more fun and contribute to how they help James to achieve his goal, including the intellectually sophisticated Mr. Grasshopper, the old ladylike charming Miss Ladybug, the tough wisecracking Mr. Centipede, the mysteriously spicy but sweet Miss Spider, the pessimistic Earthworm, and the old light-bringing Glowworm.
It's the lad from the house. What's his name?
Miserable tick. I thought it was rotten little grub.
No, that's what those horrible ants call him. His real name is, well, it's James.
The characters don't have much to offer for the movie, but for what some can offer, they are capable of making the trip amusing. Well, kind of. The songs. Technically, yes, this is considered to be a musical, but by musical standards, there isn't as many songs as there would usually be in one. In fact, there are only 4 musical numbers throughout the feature, and the contribution of those 4 are good. Not really spectacular, but they are some of the better parts of the feature. I might as well get the weakest one out of the way. My Name is James is meant to be the sympathetic story describing what the kid wants the most, to escape his aunts and live a happy life. I get that it wants to capture the mood like this is coming from a kid, but that's exactly the issue. It just sounds like a song that the kid is making up on the spot to himself because he has nothing else to do.
There's a city that I dreamed of, very far from here.
But then things immediately pick up when it's the bugs' turn to sing about what they want with That's the Life for Me, a more upbeat tune that plays a lot with the characters' personalities to describe what they are hoping to find in New York City.
Bright lights,
big city, that's where we gotta go. Where the food is great and the bugs are so pretty. I'd like to get my arms around 100 or so.
After that, it's the most clever song of the film, Eating the Peach, to which the lyrics are actually paragraphs from the original book describing what the bugs like to eat before digging in the peach itself.
I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs, but I love hot frogs, and surely you'll agree.
And finally, there is Family, which this one is a little mixed. It can feel a bit like the generic We Love Each Other because we're like a family type of song, but the personalities of the bug characters do help out a bit to give the number that special touch like they did with That's the Life for Me.
Love is the sweetest thing. Love does exactly what it wants to do.
It may not be as dependent on its songs, only requiring the bare minimum to make it count as a musical, and they're not necessarily the most memorable aspects of the feature, but they can provide some additional fun along their journey. James and the Giant Peach highlights both the best and the worst of movies based on a children's book, resulting in an animated feature that is far from great, but is, for the most part, enjoyable. It has its fair share of issues, like with its weak writing that result in an oversimplified story with not much narrative substance to offer, and a bunch of characters with little development and sometimes little acting skills. On the other hand, there are times when it can be fun and some good effort is noticeably put into this picture, like with the awesome and creative stop-motion animation that really gave life to the film, bug characters that help make the adventure pleasant, and songs that brighten up the mood to have this be a feel-good movie. It's a feature that I'd say that it's worth watching at least once. Maybe there will be some that will be more charmed to it, and others will probably feel the same way as Roald Dahl did with some of the other film adaptations to his books. But at least try it to see where you put yourself. However, I'd recommend to just skip to the part where James enters the peach and go from there. You could just read what happened during the beginning for context, and you'll save yourself 20 minutes of live-action drag. It's not among stop-motion's best, and certainly not the best Roald Dahl adaptation, but it does have its charming moments worth remembering by.
Hey guys, this is Animat, and I want to start things off by giving out a huge thanks to Ryan Walterson, whose amazing support on Patreon allowed him to get some great rewards, including this one, where he got to go and ask me to do a review of James and the Giant Peach. And usually by this time, this is where I would go and have a bit of an epilogue talk, if you will, where I would give out some additional opinions, some extra thoughts, or talk a bit about my personal experience when watching something like James and the Giant Peach or whatever animated film that I would be reviewing. However, this time around I want to do a little bit of an experimentation, something a little bit different, where I'm just going to go straight to what you guys want to hear and go directly to the animation hat to pick out the next animated film that I'm going to review. I know that usually by this time some people have complained that they don't necessarily care about this part, or often it is true that I would end up repeating myself with what I already said in the review. So might as well go directly into this and directly to the part what you all want to know. So with that said and done, before we go and pick the next one, I would just like to say, if you guys would like to be like Ryan Walterson and you would like to go and get some amazing rewards while supporting my work, including but not limited to watching my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you guys would like to suggest an animated film you would like me to review and that I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. Alright, so with that said, let's go and pick the next one right over here. And it shall be, there we go. Alright, so The next review shall now be... Hold on. What the... Is it a short title, or... Oh, it is a short title. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, this is... Oh, wow. I've always been very curious to know about this movie in particular, and it's definitely something from one of the greatest among Japanese animators or Japanese directors who would go and create some animated features. And, well, let's just say that with this one, yeah, this might sound like a bit of a bad pun, but this is the best I could think of in terms of a clue to discuss about this, because it's one of those expect the unexpected kind of things. But in terms of those films, this one will definitely have some extra spice to it.